A young boy was walking across a long lonely road when he saw something that got his attention. It was a red ball. He moves closer, bends slowly and picking it up. He instantly knew what it was, but he insisted on keeping it, and he would later realize that he shouldn't have kept it and that it was a completely bad idea that will unfold more terrifying encounters in the future. Welcome to Story Sphere, and it's story time. Grab your popcorns and stick around. We tell stories that will make your skin crawl and make you thrilled. If you like this, then like and subscribe. Also share your feedbacks and story suggestions on our email, storesphere07@gmail.com. Enjoy the story. On a bright Saturday morning, a young boy called James was walking down a long lonely road. He was going to see his best friend in the next neighborhood about some few miles away. He and his best friend, also his classmate from his present school, have built a very strong inseparable bond over the years. Indeed, a very strong friendship. James' neighborhood was quite new and developing, so there are not many people living there at the time. His neighborhood was a bit far from the outside world, a little bit secluded, and since there are only few people staying at that time, the place turned out to be very boring, a bit lonely, having no element of liveliness, and most of its inhabitants lived below average lives. James usually goes to his friend's place from time to time, since he was more closer to him, and also since his friends stay in a more developed and more lively place with a lot of interesting activities going on. As he continued walking to his best friend's place, he kept thinking about what might have happened to his best friend Lucas. Lucas had not been in school for about 3 days, and James turns out to be a little bit worried and concerned, because his best friend was very punctual with school and it was very unlikely of him to be absent from school. The main reason why he was going to Lucas's home that day was to inquire about Lucas's state of health and probably why he had been absent from school. After walking for a while, he saw something. As he moved closer, it was a tiny red ball. Wondering what it could be, he picked it up, and as he pressed it, it squished, producing a very familiar sound. He instantly knew what it was. It was a clown's nose. He kept the clown's nose in his pocket, in order to show to his best friend. After walking few more miles, he got to his best friend's house. His best friend was so pleased to see him. He asked his friend why he hasn't been present in school, which his friend gave a simple and straightforward reply. "I was sick, but now I'm getting better. Anyways, seeing you just makes everything fine, and I'm happy you are getting better, and look, I got something to show you," James replied as he dipped his hand into his pocket and brought out the clown's nose he had picked up earlier. His friend was very happy, as one could tell from his facial expression. They spent the whole day playing like brothers, running around and engaging in different exciting games. Later in the day, at about 5:45 p.m., the boys were called to have dinner, and after devouring their plates of foods, James had to go back home since it was getting a bit dark due to the fact that it was evening. Before leaving, James promised to come the following week as usual, and Lucas requested for the clown's nose so that he could play with it, and stating that James could collect it whenever he comes back. James instantly agrees, basically having no problem with that. He hugs his best friend and he started heading home. He walked so slowly, and that was because he overfed at Lucas's place. After walking few miles and was getting more closer to his house, the evening turned night, and he could only see what was ahead of him, due to the few streetlights along the road, although the streetlights were very dimmed. As he moved a bit further, he saw a figure standing from afar, so he stopped completely frightened. The figure was standing at the exact spot where he had picked up the clown's nose earlier that day. He walked a little bit closer to get a more clearer view, and on close examination on the figure, he could tell that it was a human, and in fact it was a clown. Today's video is sponsored by Grunts. Some of you might have heard of Grunts, but for those that haven't heard of Grunts, they basically help in filling your nutrition gaps, giving you better nutrition tips and recommendations that will unlock your vibrant health, revitalize your body, boost gut health and more. And a good nutrition is definitely a thing. Remember, health is wealth, a healthy life is a wealthy life, and everyone deserves to be healthy. They majorly operate in the United States, but you can check if they operate outside the United States. You can check them out by clicking the link in the bio. You should try it out and you won't regret it. Let's get back to the story. Trying so hard not to act nervous or show any form of fear or weakness, he looked at the clown that was also looking at him eyeballs to eyeballs, with a sinister smile on his face, making a very terrifying eye contact with James. Growing up, he had heard a lot of terrifying stories about terrifying stalker clowns and even killer clowns, so he knew that clowns were very dangerous and he was obviously very terrified. As he looked at the clown, several thoughts ran down his mind. He thought of running, but he also knew that it would be very difficult to outrun a clown more bigger and definitely more faster than he was. He was soon brought back to his terrifying reality, with a spooky voice from the clown, saying these words. "I saw you picked a thing of mine earlier today and I want it back. I saw you picked up my nose, can you give it back to me?" he added. At this point, James was so terrified that he could not speak, and to make the situation worse, the clown's nose was not with him, because he had given it to his best friend Lucas. The atmosphere got more tensed with each second, and James finally replied, "I took it, but I never knew who it belongs to. I didn't know that it belongs to you and I don't have it here right now. I gave it to someone," he said, trying not to be scared and also not disclosing his friend's identity in the process. The clown made a sinister laugh and said, "If you can't provide my nose, then I would definitely need yours." Sensing the situation was getting more frightening, James knew that he had to run, but he was just waiting for the right moment to do so. And just as he was thinking about the best time to run, the clown took a step forward, and he revealed a machete on his right hand, and James instantly knew that he had to run. He knew that he couldn't outrun the clown, but he knew he just had to run as fast as he could. As he started running, the clown also started chasing him within higher speed. But he was a bit far from the clown when he started running, so that gave him a bit advantage. But as he ran, he could clearly sense that the clown was more closer with each step he took, but he didn't look back because that will only slow him down, and make it more easier for him to get caught. Few seconds to almost getting caught up by the clown, he saw a truck speeding across, and immediately he started screaming for help. The man in the truck stopped and came out. Seeing James, the man could clearly tell that he was completely terrified as he was breathing so fast, almost out of breath. James, feeling a bit relieved now, decided to look back, but the clown chasing him earlier was nowhere to be found. He narrated his fearful encounter with the clown to the man, and the man reassures him that everything is fine and that he does not need to worry because everything was under control. He also told James never to walk alone, especially in a lonely environment like that, because it was not safe. It turns out that the man from the truck was one of James' neighbors who recently moved to the neighborhood, and his name is Mr. Robert White, a former U.S. military man, who retired after years of active service. He was very fearless and very aggressive to evil doings, but he was also a very kind-hearted man. In fact, he was just returning back home when he saw James running and looking completely terrified, but he couldn't see what was chasing James. It turns out that the clown had probably spotted Mr. Robert's truck earlier, and he instantly disappeared without trace, concealing his already unknown identity. Mr. Robert drove James home that day, and James was very happy. He knew that he was very lucky that Mr. Robert showed up exactly at the right and perfect time. If not, it could have been a different story. He could have been injured or even worse. Since that day, James stopped walking alone to his friend's house. Whenever he was going to see his friend, he usually goes in Mr. Robert's truck. The following week, he visited his friend and narrates all his terrifying encounters with the clown. Although his friend was scared, but he was more happy that his best friend was lucky to be alive and in good physical and mental state. Hope you enjoyed today's story. You can share your original scary stories, true or fictional, to our email, storesphere07@gmail.com, and you can also share your story suggestions as well. See you in the next video. Also, you can watch this bonus story of a creepy stalker following a girl from the grocery store. This happened around the time I was 16. I went to the grocery store to get some foodstuffs and other cooking items. It was a Saturday evening. My dad usually takes me to the grocery store, but he went to the nearby village for some business meetings, so I had no choice than to go alone, after waiting for him without him showing up. The grocery store was about 20 minutes on foot. I got to the grocery store and I got the necessary food items as I set to go back home. It was getting a bit darker. As I was coming out, a regular-looking guy approached me and asked if I lived around. I was quite nervous because the question sounds a bit disturbing. A total stranger asking if I lived around was quite disturbing. I said no as I walked away, trying not to look back. I could sense him staring at me as I walked. This time I was so scared and very uncomfortable, as I hurried back home. About 15 minutes later, I heard, "Hey, you know you can't run from me, right, even if you try." Hearing this made me felt instantly sick in my stomach. I turned back and saw the same guy from the grocery store. I froze for about 20 seconds and was motionless. I was freaking out right now. I knew that I couldn't outrun him, so I was scared and confused. I asked, "What do you want from me?" He didn't reply as he stared directly to my eyes, freaking me even more. I could feel my skin crawling and my body getting so cold. "I am calling the cops," I said with a fearful tone. He laughed this time. He was about 6 feet tall, standing few meters away. He slowly started approaching me, so I had no choice than to run. I knew that I couldn't outrun him, but I had to try. I threw all the food items that I had bought from the grocery store and ran as fast as I could, screaming help to the top of my voice as loud as I can. He was about getting grip of me. Suddenly my dad's car showed up. I saw my dad with one of his friends. He stopped and asked why I was running and screaming so hard. I told him that a regular guy followed me from the grocery store and started chasing me. I looked back and the regular guy was gone, almost as if he vanished. I entered my dad's car. We tried searching the neighborhood, but we didn't see the guy. Probably he doesn't even live in that community. My dad told me that when he got home and he didn't see me, he had to start coming to the grocery store, and I thanked God he did. I couldn't have imagined what that guy would have done to me. My dad told me never to go outside the neighborhood alone because they are evil stalkers around looking for innocent people to make their victims, which was clearly correct. We got to where I had threw away the food items earlier. They were still intact, so we took them home. Thank God my dad showed up on time. It could have been a very different story, maybe a tragic one.